Alrighty, what is going on, my Sunday school crew? Hopefully you guys have been doing well. And the stress is real, and so a little tip I give you guys for coping with stress is just go for a walk. It's very therapeutic, and of course it gets your blood flowing, and it's a form of exercise that you can just release all your stress and energy on, so that you don't feel too tense up inside. And so yeah, that is one little simple trick. I hope it suits you well, and so thank you again for just tuning into this Sunday school lesson, and I hope you enjoyed. But first, before we go off our walk, let's read some scriptures.
The Philistines drew up in the battle array to meet the Israel. When the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield. When the people came into the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us take to ourselves from Shiloh the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that it may come among us and deliver us from the power of our enemies." So the people of Shiloh, and from there they carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who sits above the cherubim, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, who were there on the ark of the covenant of God. As the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, and the earth resounded. When the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What does the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" Then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. The Philistines were afraid, for they said, "God has come up into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. And the slaughter was very great, for there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. And the ark of the Lord was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Now the people of Bethel Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they raised their eyes and saw the ark, and were glad to see it. The cart came in the field of Joshua, the Beth Shemite, and stood there where there was a large stone. And they split wood of the cart, and offered cows as burnt offerings to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord, and the boxes with it, in which there were articles of gold, and put them on large stone. And then the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices that day to the Lord. And when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned to Ekron that day. He struck down some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they looked into the ark of the Lord. He struck down all the people, 50,070 men. And the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with great slaughter. The men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, his holy God? And whom shall he go up from us?" So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, and saying, "The Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you."
Alrighty, so onward with this lesson, we find out that the Israelites have been at war with the Philistines. And so in this case, battle number 1, when they fought with the Philistines, they lost that battle. And so when they came back, they questioned themselves, saying, why was God not there with them in the battlefield, and why did they not win? And so they had this bright idea of bringing God with them to the battlefield, and that came in the form of taking the Ark of the Covenant, which was back in the day, it was God's way of being with his people, the priests back in the day, to battle. And lo and behold, they lost this battle, and what was worse is they lost the Ark of the Covenant to the Philistines. And so the question to answer here is, why was God not with them on the battlefield? And so that answer is because of sin. As we all know, sin separates our connection with God. And they sinned because, if you remember in the previous lesson, it was about the prophet Samuel. He prophesied about how he was going to take over instead of Eli's 2 sons. And that was the reason, because Eli's 2 sons, they were heavily in sin. And so God could not use them because they were in sin. And so with the second part of this message, it is about how when the Philistines, after they captured the Ark of the Covenant, they sent it back because it was causing them trouble. And when the Israelites finally received the Ark of the Covenant back, they rejoiced, they celebrated, they made sacrifices to it. But then it also caused them trouble as well. And so you might be thinking, Mike, why is it that the Ark of the Covenant is causing both parties trouble? In this case, it was because they did not treat the Ark of the Covenant as holy as God wanted it to. And so in this case, with the Philistines, they treated it more as, you could say, a trophy of war. And so with them, they gave it to their God as you could say a sacrifice, an offering. But then lo and behold, I'm not pun intended, the God was put in its place. And what's worse is that the people, they had tumors on their skin, and so they didn't want all these bad things to happen to them anymore, so they sent the Ark of the Covenant back to the Israelites. And so after the Israelites have gotten the Ark of the Covenant back, of course, they made sacrifices to it, they celebrated, they rejoiced to it, they even touched it. And despite doing all these things, they still got in trouble. The thing was, of course, they made sacrifices, they touched the Ark of the Covenant, and they looked inside to see what was inside. And all these three things. You can only do them if you were a priest. And so if you were not a priest, it was set in God's, you could say his commandments or his commands to the priest that if anyone besides a priest does these, they have a chance to die. And so that's exactly what happened to the Israelites once they did all these three things. So in conclusion to this message, it's, many times we see God as an idol and we only want him for what he can give us. But in thoughts and actions like these, it leads us to not really see anything valuable from God and see him for who he is, and that can lead us to sin. And of course, now we know that sin separates us from God, and being separated from him, it leads us to miss out on God's true blessings for our lives. And with we're already suffering as much as it is right now, and with sin in our lives, that could potentially make it worse for us. But good news, the Ark of the Covenant was God's ways of being with his people back in the day. But nowadays, since Jesus has died for us to save us from our sins, as sin can no longer disrupt Jesus' Wi-Fi connection to our smartphones, and Jesus is also with us wherever we are, instead of having to go visit an Ark of the Covenant to talk with God. So I hope you all enjoyed this message. God bless, and I will see you next time.